He was halfway through his third cigarette when the sky cracked open. Not in the poetic way people say when a thunderstorm rolls in. No, this was something else. The clouds didn't gather, they split silently, like something sharp had sliced the sky itself. No sound, no wind, just that eerie, unnatural stillness before the air changes, and everything in your gut tells you you're not supposed to be here. Cal sat on the rusted hood of his truck, eyes narrowing, smoke curling up past the creases in his weather-worn face. 42 years old, ex-military, dishonorably discharged after the Kandahar incident, the details of which no one asked and he never volunteered. He'd been left behind by his unit, written off by his government, and dumped back into civilian life like broken scrap. Since then, he barely left the outskirts of the Wyoming town he grew up in, and even that town barely remembered he existed. But that sky, he'd seen things blown apart, cities flattened, bodies burning, but never this, never quiet like this. At first he thought it was some stealth bomber tech test, a new aircraft, maybe experimental. Then the light came. It wasn't harsh, not like movie aliens with blinding beams or chaos. It was calculated, clean. It spread across the horizon like a wave of silver blue. No sound, no temperature. Just light. Something so wrong it made the hairs on his arms rise like they'd seen something his brain hadn't caught up to yet. The cows in the distance stopped moving. The windmills froze. The birds didn't fly away, they vanished. 1 second there, next, gone. And then, without warning, the sky filled with them. Massive structures, silent and silver, floated in the atmosphere like gods just waking up from sleep. They had no markings, no engines, no obvious weapons, just perfect geometry, too perfect. You looked at them, and something deep in your head wanted to scream. Shapes like that shouldn't exist in nature. Cal had no fancy degrees, but he'd seen enough war to know anything that clean is built for one reason: domination. And still, no sound. The TV inside his trailer was blaring news alerts within seconds. Cal walked in, cigarette still in his mouth, the remote untouched on the counter. He didn't need volume. The panic on their faces told him everything. Global feed, every nation, every language, every face the same. Shock, terror, confusion. The president was speaking within minutes. Words like diplomatic contact, unprovoked arrival, international unity. But it was all noise. Everyone with a shred of instinct knew. These things weren't here to talk. Cal's phone buzzed. He hadn't touched it in 2 days. The screen lit up with a name he didn't want to see. His brother. The one who still served. Still wore the uniform. Still believed in the machine. Cal let it ring out. He stepped back outside, lit a 4th cigarette. They hadn't done anything yet. The ships, they just hovered over cities, over oceans, over the polar caps, like surveyors, watching, studying. But the feeling, the pressure in his chest, like he was being looked at by something older than time, stronger than logic, that didn't go away. By nightfall, people started killing each other. Not the aliens, humans. Looters flooded the cities. Gas stations caught fire, phones overloaded with fake news, doomsday theories, end-of-world predictions. Religion exploded, governments snapped. One missile fired from North Korea was vaporized mid-air. No retaliation, no sound. Just gone. By morning, 12 nations had declared martial law. Still not a single alien had spoken. Not a message, not a signal, just those ships, floating, watching. Cal barely slept. He sat on his porch, rifle across his lap, every joint in his body twitching like it had when the IED went off in 2008. He hadn't touched that gun in years, but his instincts didn't care, because somehow, even without a sound, He knew what was coming. They'd found us, and they weren't impressed, and for the first time in his life, after war, betrayal, and being forgotten by his own kind, Cal was afraid. Cal didn't sleep that night. It wasn't insomnia. Insomnia was when you couldn't sleep despite wanting to. This was different. He didn't even try. There was no point. His brain was running in loops, and his hands wouldn't stop twitching. He kept checking the rifle even though he hadn't fired a live round in over 5 years. The action still clicked like muscle memory. Rack, chamber, safety off, breathe, the way they taught him back when he believed the uniform meant something. The morning brought no relief, no sunshine, no answers. The alien ships still hovered. One sat right over Cheyenne, a half-hour drive from his trailer. It didn't move. It didn't pulse. Just hung there, low enough that the power lines underneath it buzzed like static, but high enough that it felt untouchable. A god dangling its foot in the pond. And the worst part? It was so damn quiet. Even after all that, after entire nations locked down, after humans started slaughtering each other in panic, the ships didn't do a thing. No retaliation, no broadcast, no visible reaction. They were watching. That was all. And somehow, that was scarier than an attack. Cal flipped through the news channels that morning like a man trying to find a face he trusted. He found none. Every station said the same thing. No communication, no attacks, no clear sign of purpose. The world's top linguists, physicists, theologians, politicians, and paranoid freaks were all screaming over each other on split-screen panels, throwing out theories like confetti, mass experiment, galactic trial, judgment day, simulation reset. One commentator, an old NASA scientist with a dead look in her eyes, said the part that stuck. "If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead." She didn't smile when she said it. Cal stood, stretched his back with a groan, and walked out onto the dirt path leading away from the trailer. His boots sank into the dust like they belonged there. Maybe they did. Maybe this was all the world was supposed to ever be. Dirt, isolation, silence, and now something ancient hovering in the sky, pulling the strings. He heard an engine in the distance, a pickup, coming too fast. He turned toward the road just as a battered red Dodge tore around the bend, kicking up dust and pebbles. The driver saw him and slammed the brakes, tires skidding in the gravel. It was Trevor, Cal's brother, military man, still wearing the uniform, still drinking the government's Kool-Aid. Cal didn't move, just narrowed his eyes. Trevor stepped out, dust swirling around his boots. His jaw was locked tight. He looked older than he should. Same face, same jawline, same eyes, just more tired, more hollow. "Been trying to reach you for 2 days," Trevor said. No greeting, no smile. "Didn't ask you to," Cal replied. Trevor sighed, stepped closer, hands at his sides but twitching like he wanted to reach for something. Not a weapon, just something to hold. "They've activated every X-Special unit within range. I don't know how, but your name got flagged." Cal spit in the dirt. "Tell them I died. Hell, they already tried once." "This isn't about you," Trevor snapped. "This isn't politics. This isn't some Black Ops guilt trip. This is something else. Something big." "I can see that," Cal said, pointing to the sky. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Trevor added, more quietly, "They're not here to destroy us." "Not yet. They're here to study us, and that scares the brass more than anything." "Why?" Trevor looked away. "Because they already know who we are. They know everything. The moment their ships appeared, every satellite we own got overridden. Our entire nuclear grid got mapped and disabled within 6 seconds. 6 seconds. They know what we eat, how we lie, how we treat our sick, how we kill each other, everything." Cal didn't flinch. "So why haven't they left?" Trevor didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something from his coat. A flash drive. "What's that?" Cal asked. "It's data." Trevor held it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Intercepted transmission from one of the ships, decoded partially by AI. You were mentioned in it." Cal blinked. "The hell are you talking about?" Trevor took a step closer. "Not just you. Others too. Ex-soldiers, survivors, people who've seen things, people the system tried to erase. They're not looking at presidents or billionaires or tech geniuses. They're looking at ghosts." That hit Cal harder than he expected. "Why me?" "I don't know," Trevor said, his voice cracking slightly. "But they called you a residual, whatever that means." Cal took the drive. It felt cold, too cold for something out of his brother's coat pocket. "I'm not going back," Cal said quietly. "I'm not wearing a uniform again. I'm not dying for a flag that let me rot in a ditch." Trevor didn't argue. He just nodded. "Then don't die for the flag. Die for whatever comes next." He turned and walked back to his truck without another word. Cal stared at the drive. That night, he plugged it into the old laptop he hadn't booted in years. The screen flickered, then turned black. A single sentence appeared. "You are not what they think you are." Then a sound. Not words, not language, something deeper. A vibration that hummed in his skull, behind his eyes, in his spine. He felt like he was being read, layer by layer, memory by memory. Then it stopped. The screen went white, and the video played. It wasn't much, just Earth from space, thousands of years compressed into seconds, wars, plagues, empires, genocide, industry, progress, collapse, rebirth. All of it, from fire pits to nuclear detonations to satellites spinning around a dying blue marble. And then, silence. A figure stood in the center of the screen. Humanoid. Cloaked. Its face a blur of static. But the voice, it didn't speak. It pressed into him. Direct. Piercing. "You are the fracture in their equation. You are the virus in the machine. You were meant to die, yet persist. You were abandoned, yet you endured. That is what we fear. That is what we seek. Not your leaders, not your cities. You." The video ended. Cal sat frozen for a long time. The drive burned out. Smoke curled from the USB port like something alive had just left it. He poured a drink. Sat in silence. Tried to breathe. They weren't impressed with humanity, but they were curious about one thing. The ones left behind. The broken. The forgotten. The ones who never quit, even after the world discarded them. The next morning, the ship over Cheyenne moved. Not fast, not hostile, just shifted. People panicked, sirens blared, missiles were armed, but it didn't fire. It landed, right outside the city, and waited. 3 hours later, a government convoy came up Cal's dirt road. Not soldiers, not tanks. A black car. A suit stepped out. No name, no badge, just a message. "They asked for you." Cal didn't answer right away. He looked out at the ship on the horizon. It looked smaller now, up close. Less godlike. More like a question waiting to be answered. He went inside, got his jacket, slung the rifle on his back. When he stepped into the car, the agent said nothing. Cal finally asked, "You don't even know why they want me, do you?" The agent didn't look at him, just replied flatly, "No, but they refused to speak to anyone else." The ride was silent. As they neared the landing zone, Cal saw the crowds, tanks, drones, choppers, but none moved in. A wide perimeter had been cleared, and in the center the ship waited. Not open, not closed, just there, waiting. As he stepped out, the wind shifted. The ship began to hum. Not loud, not threatening, just low, a kind of resonance that vibrated deep in his chest. It didn't scare him. It felt familiar, like something inside him had always been connected to this moment. The ship opened, not a door, not a hatch. It unfolded, a stairway of light appeared, wide, welcoming. Cal didn't ask questions. He walked up. And as he did, the world held its breath. Not just Earth, but the galaxy. Because in that moment, when the broken soldier stepped onto an alien craft, alone, unchosen by his people, unwanted by his country, something ancient and silent across the stars finally stirred, and for the first time since they had arrived. The ship spoke. The light wasn't blinding. That's what Cal expected, some radiant white hallway or flashing alien symbols. Maybe even that antiseptic smell that came with sterile labs. But no, the light was warm, dim, almost like firelight, like something primal. And instead of steel or glass or whatever alien tech he thought he'd walk into, the floor felt like stone under his boots. The inside of the ship didn't make sense. It was far bigger than the outside. Vast. Open. Like he'd walked into a cathedral carved from dark marble, lit only by glowing veins in the walls that pulsed slow, like a heartbeat. No visible machinery. No buzzing. Just silence. Deep, heavy silence. The kind that crushed your thoughts until you were forced to feel everything you'd buried. Cal stopped walking. He wasn't sure how far in he was. There was no direction here. No walls, just space. Then something moved. Not in front of him. Inside him. A presence. It wasn't speaking in words. It was pushing thoughts, emotions, memories. He staggered back as images flooded him. His childhood, barefoot and sunburnt on the farm. The war, his squad bleeding out under desert moons. The tribunal, his dishonorable discharge, his father's funeral, the silence afterward. He dropped to one knee, gripping his head. "Stop," he muttered, voice dry. "You want something from me? Talk like a damn person." A voice answered, but not aloud. It sounded like it echoed from the walls, yet also from behind his ears. "Talking is for those who hide their truths in words. You do not." Cal grunted, forcing himself back to his feet. "You dragged me in here just to poke around my head?" The voice, not cold, not warm, just weighty, replied, "You are not unique because of your past. You are unique because you survived it without hope. Most cling to faith. To vengeance, to illusion. You walked away from all of them. You did not break. You calcified." Cal spat on the floor. "That's supposed to be a compliment? It is a warning, to others. You are one of many, but few like you remain." He took another step, fists clenched. "What do you want from me?" Suddenly, the space shifted. It didn't move in a way he could see, but something around him restructured, like the room had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Before him stood a figure. Tall, humanoid, vaguely. Its shape was fluid, like shadows that refused to settle. No face, no limbs, just the outline of something ancient wrapped in motionless smoke. It radiated not light, but pressure, like it carried the weight of millennia. It didn't step forward. It didn't have to. "You misunderstand. We do not want anything from you. We came to understand why your species still exists at all." Cal frowned. "You saying we're not supposed to?" "Statistically, no. Spiritually, even less." Cal folded his arms. "That's a hell of a first impression. You drop out of the sky, scare the world half to death, and then insult the species." The entity didn't respond immediately. Then, "Do you know how many species we've encountered across 10,000 systems?" He didn't answer. 2,711. Of those, 5 achieved what you call interstellar reach. None did so while still murdering their own. None built cities on bones and called it progress. None extinguished species for sport, then wrote songs about their grief afterward. Cal bristled. So what? You're here to judge? No. We are here to listen to the silence you leave behind. And Earth was the loudest. He didn't know what that meant. The entity continued. When your signals reached our edge, primitive, confused, beautiful, we did not understand. A species capable of such cruelty, yet also sacrifice. Betrayal, yet loyalty. You create meaning out of your suffering and then destroy it the next day. You are contradiction in its most volatile form. Cal let the silence hang for a second, then muttered, Yeah, sounds about right. And yet, you remain. That part struck him. There was no condescension in it, no malice, just confusion, like a scientist staring at a specimen that refuses to behave. He took a cautious breath. You wanted me because I'm a mess, because I'm broken. Because you are still functioning despite being broken. Most creatures fail when they are damaged. You mutate. He couldn't argue with that. The war should have killed him. The tribunal should have ended him. Being tossed aside by the people he bled for should have buried him in alcohol or a ditch. But he hadn't. He hadn't grown stronger, just harder. He wasn't better, just still here. And apparently, that was what interested them. Cal stepped closer. So what now? You studied me. Congratulations. You've seen rock bottom. The figure finally moved, or shifted, more like a ripple in reality. And then something appeared between them. A chair. It was metal, rusted, human. The kind you'd find in a busted cafeteria or prison yard. Cal stared at it. What is that? Memory, the voice said. We built it from your mind. Sit, speak. Tell us what Earth is when it is not pretending to be great. He didn't want to. Every part of him screamed to walk away, but some darker part, the one that still flinched at thunder, still scanned rooftops in crowded areas, still memorized exit routes in restaurants, that part whispered, What else do you have left to lose? So he sat. And he spoke. Not like a soldier, not like a patriot, but like a man who lived in the ruins long after the parades ended. He talked about the sandstorms, the cold MREs, the sound of a dying man trying to breathe through a crushed lung. He spoke about the way civilians screamed in languages he didn't understand, about the blank stares of children holding pieces of their mothers, about the rage that came later, when he realized he hadn't fought for anything except oil and ego. He told them about coming home, about the silence in his father's house. The way people looked at him like a ghost wearing dog tags, the slow, sharp disintegration of his mind, the pills, the VA clinics, the pity. He spoke until his throat went dry, until the words came out hoarse and cracked and bitter, and they didn't interrupt once. The entity simply watched. If it could feel, it didn't show it. When he finished, he leaned forward, elbows on knees, sweat down his spine. That's Earth, he said. That's the part we don't put in the history books. For a long time, nothing moved. Then finally, and yet, you are not extinct. No, Cal muttered. We're too damn stubborn for that. A pulse moved through the ship, like a deep breath. You were not chosen to be a representative. You are not here to justify. You are here because we do not understand how something so flawed can still radiate such fire. Cal looked up. Fire. You fight when you should surrender. You love when you should hate. You endure pain, betrayal, abandonment, and yet create beauty in the aftermath. That is not efficiency. That is not evolution. That is something else. He didn't know what to say to that. They weren't here to dominate. They were here because humans made noise in a galaxy that had gone quiet. Because apparently, most intelligent life burned itself out before reaching the stars. Because efficiency, logic, unity, those were sterile, lifeless, predictable. But Earth? Earth was a wildfire, unstable, dangerous, but alive. The figure stepped back. You are not to be destroyed. You are to be observed, to be feared, to be remembered. Cal narrowed his eyes. Why feared? The voice rippled. Because one day you will stop fighting each other and turn outward. The silence that followed said more than any speech ever could. Cal stood up. His knees popped. So what, this was a test? No, a warning, to ourselves. He walked to the exit. The ramp unfolded again. As he stepped into the light, the wind outside hit his face like reality crashing back in. Cameras clicked. Drones hovered. Soldiers tensed. He said nothing. Just walked past them. Back to the car. Back to dirt. Back to Earth. Because the truth was, the galaxy hadn't fallen silent in awe of humanity. It had fallen silent in terror. Not because of our weapons, not even because of our hate, but because something as shattered, volatile, and self-destructive as humanity had survived. And worse, we had started to dream. They didn't let him go home right away. Cal wasn't surprised. The second he stepped out of that ship, he felt the air change. Not just the physical air, the psychic weight of attention, the eyes, the whispers, the fear, and most of all, the expectation. The military didn't take him in cuffs, but it might have been cleaner if they had. Instead, they wrapped him in protocol, non-disclosure forms, digital contracts, temporary protective custody, which sounded a hell of a lot like house arrest with a better view. They moved him into a secure location, an off-grid military compound outside Helena, Montana. Bare walls, concrete floors, a cot, and a chair. Nothing personal, no windows, just surveillance. He didn't complain. That would have meant giving them more than silence. And Cal had learned long ago that silence, when used right, could feel like a weapon. He knew the questions were coming. Sure enough, within 12 hours, they sent in the first suit. Clean-cut, young, the kind of face that was too symmetrical to trust. No insignia, no rank, just a clipboard and a lie already loaded behind his teeth. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm not here to interrogate you," the man said, pulling up a chair across from him. "I'm here to help facilitate the national security process." Cal stared back. "You're here to get the aliens' homework off me and make sure I don't say something stupid on live television." The man paused, smiled just a little. "We're all on the same side." Cal didn't smile back. "No, we're not." The first round of questions were boring. What did the interior of the ship look like? How did they communicate? Did they display any hostile behavior? What language was used? Did they request anything? He gave them nothing they didn't already know. He left out the part about the memory chair, the visions, the warnings. He didn't mention what the entity had said about humanity's fire, about fear, because deep down, he knew something they didn't. The aliens hadn't picked Earth to befriend it. They'd picked Cal because he represented the part of Earth that refused to die quietly. And that part scared the galaxy more than any nuclear weapon ever could. 2 days in, they moved him to a slightly larger room. This one had a view of the tree line. Still no phone, still no internet. But they brought real food, a soft bed, little things, like he was being courted or studied. He didn't care. But what bothered him, what kept him awake at night, was the change in the sky. The ship hadn't left. In fact, more were arriving. 16 ships, total, positioned over major cities, not moving, not speaking, just watching. The public, predictably, was coming apart at the seams. He saw it on the muted TV they left on in his room. Panic, riots, governments collapsing, Conspiracy theories breeding like roaches. Some people worshipped the ships like gods. Others wanted them shot down. And in the middle of it all, one man, him, was being held like a walking question mark. He had no answers. But he did have a choice. He could stay silent, or he could tell them the truth. So when the young agent came back on the third day, clipboard in hand, Cal leaned forward and asked the question that had been rotting in his chest. "What are they saying about me?" The agent hesitated. "You're being discussed, monitored. There's been speculation." "Speculation," Cal repeated. "You mean people think I'm some kind of prophet?" "No, a liaison, a possible representative." Cal chuckled. It was dry and short. "I never voted. I don't speak for this planet." The agent didn't laugh. "But they think I do, don't they?" After a pause, the agent nodded. "And that scares the hell out of you?" No answer. "Let me out," Cal said, standing. "I want to speak, to the people, live." The agent blinked. "That's not advisable." Cal stepped closer, slow and steady. "You think locking me in here helps? You think they're not watching how you treat me? You think those ships haven't already made up their mind about this species?" He paused. "They picked me because I'm not a leader. I'm a reminder." The agent looked uncomfortable. He left without responding. An hour later, Cal was handed a suit and told to prepare. By the next morning, he stood in front of a camera. Not in a White House press room, not in a military bunker, but outside, beneath a cold sky, with one of the alien ships hovering miles above the city skyline, like an eye of God, broadcast live to every corner of the globe. He took no prepared speech, no teleprompter, no politician behind him, just wind and the truth. He looked into the camera. "My name is Cal Reynolds. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a good man. But the aliens asked for me, and I stood on their ship." He paused. "They didn't threaten us. They didn't praise us. They didn't offer help. What they did was look at us. All of us. Our history. Our decisions. Our failures." He turned slightly, looked up at the ship in the sky. And you know what they saw? A beat. Contradiction. A planet that destroys itself and calls it progress, that hurts its own children and blames the stars, that builds weapons instead of cures, but also a planet that dreams even when it's broken, that fights when it should quit, that survives when survival makes no sense. He looked back at the camera. They weren't impressed, not by our tech, not by our politics. They were impressed that we're still here, that we haven't quit. His jaw clenched. "And now the world wants to make me a symbol, a bridge. But I'm not. I'm just a reminder of what this world has been, what it still is, and what it might become." He paused again. "If you're looking for saviors, you miss the point. If you're looking for villains, look in the mirror. But if you're looking for a reason we're still alive, you are it." He stepped back. No applause, no anthem. Just wind and silence. The broadcast cut. He didn't return to the military compound. They let him go. Back to Wyoming. Back to the dust and the sky, but things didn't return to normal, because Cal Reynolds became a name. Some said he was chosen by the stars. Others called him a traitor, a puppet, a government plant. Conspiracies erupted. Religious cults named him a prophet. Politicians tried to claim him. His face ended up on banners, shirts, even tattoos. He hated all of it. He stayed quiet until the fifth ship moved. This one, above Johannesburg, descended into the atmosphere and hovered low. Then it opened, and another human stepped out. A girl, maybe 19. Her name was Mia Gellin. She hadn't been reported missing. She wasn't a scientist. She wasn't anyone at all. Except now. She was the second human they had taken. And she said one thing. They want to listen to us. The broken ones. The ones who remember what the world tries to forget. Cal watched the news from his porch, bottle in hand. He didn't flinch, because deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. The galaxy was watching. And it wasn't just Earth on trial, it was human nature itself. The letter wasn't delivered by mail. It wasn't emailed, encrypted, or hand-delivered by a government agent. It simply appeared on the wooden kitchen table of Cal's rust-bitten trailer, right between the half-empty ashtray and the unopened can of beans. 1 second it wasn't there. The next, it was. Thick parchment, no fold, no seal, no ink. Just a small, unnerving shimmer across its surface when the sunlight hit it. He stared at it for a long time before picking it up. There were no words on the outside, but the second he touched it, something shifted in his gut. A tension, a pressure behind his eyes, like static trying to crawl through his skull. And then, quietly, clearly, and from nowhere, a voice, not alien this time, human, a woman, young, quiet, Mia Gellin. Cal, they're asking for more of us now. I wasn't the only one. You weren't either. They're choosing the ones the world tried to forget. Her voice echoed in his head like a memory he never made. There's something they're not saying, something they're afraid of. I think we were meant to destroy ourselves, but we didn't. And now they're watching us to see if we're about to do it anyway. The letter disintegrated in his hands, like dust caught in a wind that didn't exist. Cal leaned back, running a hand through his beard. The world outside hadn't changed. The Wyoming sun still hung low, the dirt still clung to his boots. But inside, something had shifted again. Subtly, unsettlingly, they were calling more. Not the scientists, not the generals, the leftovers, the ones the world stepped over, stepped on, the residuals. His phone, the same one he hadn't touched in days, buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He didn't answer, didn't need to. He already knew what it meant, because he wasn't the center of this anymore. He was just the first drop before the storm. Later that night, news broke. 11 new individuals had been taken aboard ships across the world. None had status, none had titles. All had trauma, ex-prisoners, discharged soldiers, former addicts, street kids, people listed in databases as lost causes, and all had come back, changed, not glowing, not superhuman, just quieter, eyes too still, words too careful, like they'd seen something they couldn't explain and were too smart to try. Mia went on air again, this time voluntarily. No podium, just a live stream, unfiltered. Her face looked tired. Her hands fidgeted with her sleeves. But her voice, that was calm. Steady. They don't want our leaders. They want our cracks, our broken glass, the parts of us that bleed and still move. They want to know how we didn't fall apart when everything told us to. Cal watched the entire broadcast. He didn't blink once, because she wasn't talking to the world. She was talking to him. A week later, he was standing in front of an unmarked building on the edge of Denver, a structure so plain it looked invisible, like the kind of place people walked past for years and never saw. Trevor was waiting there, still in uniform, still trying to hold himself together. "You shouldn't be here," he said, not angrily, just tired. Cal shrugged. "Where else would I be?" They hadn't spoken since the Montana compound, but the silence between them wasn't hostile. It was mutual exhaustion, brothers who'd run out of things to argue about. Trevor lit a cigarette, the first time Cal had seen him do that in years. He didn't ask where the habit came from. He knew. "You've seen them again?" Trevor asked. Cal nodded once. "Not directly, just signs, letters, dreams." Trevor looked at the building. "You know what's in there?" No, but I know I'm supposed to go in. Trevor exhaled smoke into the cold air. They're watching everything now. We can't trace their tech. Every satellite we send near the ships gets deadlocked. Every drone loses signal. They're not hiding, but they're not letting us close either. Cal looked at him. And? Trevor hesitated. They're scared of us. That caught him off guard. You're lying. No, not the government. Them, the aliens. Cal frowned. Why would they be afraid? We can't touch them. Trevor's voice lowered. Because they've seen what we do to things we can touch. We don't negotiate, we dissect, we conquer, we convert. He paused. And worse, we adapt. That word settled hard in Cal's chest. He didn't reply. Instead, he turned and entered the building. Inside was cold concrete, plain hallways, no guards, no signs, but he knew exactly where to go. It was like his feet were remembering a path his brain never learned. At the end of the corridor was a room, circular, empty, except for 12 chairs. 11 were already filled. Mia was among them. So was an old man in a janitor's uniform, a woman with needle scars on her arms, a teenager with mismatched shoes, all different, all the same. They looked up when he entered. No one smiled. He sat down in the last chair. No introductions, just quiet. Then the floor began to hum, a low vibration, familiar now, like the voice of something older than language, and then, without warning, the room changed, not physically, perceptually. They weren't in the room anymore. They were nowhere, just blackness. And in that void, voices, thousands, millions, not shouting, not whispering, just observing, and from them, one voice emerged, the same one Cal had heard aboard the ship. We study what we do not understand. We fear what we cannot predict. You are both. The janitor spoke first. His voice rough, weathered. You want to know why we survive? Silence. He stood up slowly. We survive because no one ever showed us how to stop. Mia rose next. We survive because we're taught pain before we're taught peace. The teenager's voice cracked as he added, We survive because no one else will do it for us. Cal didn't stand. He just said the truth. We survive because we're too angry to die. The voices paused. Then, finally, we do not fear your weapons. We fear your will. Another beat. We fear that what cannot be destroyed may become unstoppable. And then the light returned. They were back in the room. The chairs, the walls, the silence. No messages, no commands. Just that single chilling thought. That the galaxy, for all its power, for all its ancient reach, had finally found something it couldn't comprehend. Human defiance, not in victory, not in unity, but in the people who kept going when everything broke, the cracks that didn't heal, but hardened. And Cal knew right then, this wasn't diplomacy, this wasn't communication, this was preparation. For what, he still didn't know. But he was sure of one thing. They weren't choosing leaders. They were choosing survivors. The world had always been a fragile thing. Everyone pretended it wasn't. Politicians with their podiums, CEOs with their money, generals with their weapons. They all told the same lie, that the systems holding everything up were unshakable. But when the sky opened, that lie shattered. Cal watched it unravel from the sidelines. No longer a soldier, not quite a civilian. Just something in between, a ghost the world now looked at like it might whisper answers if they stared long enough. But he had no answers, only a warning. They weren't here to save Earth. They were testing it. That much was clear now. Since the gathering, what media was calling the event where 12 residuals met in the void, governments had started panicking in silence. Officially, everything was calm. Unofficially, chaos was building under the surface like pressure behind a dam. Private military contracts spiked. Old weapons programs, ones long buried under red tape and treaties, were being revived behind closed doors. Missile silos were no longer silent. And worst of all, the survivor list was leaking. It started with rumors, people posting names on forums, conspiracy threads accusing random nobodies of being alien chosen. Then photos started circulating. Mia, snapped outside a gas station, the old janitor cornered by journalists. Cal's own name was broadcast on international networks again, but this time with a different tone. Not awe, suspicion. Fear. One headline called him the false messenger. Another called the survivors biological weapons in waiting. And somewhere in South America, one of the 12 was found dead, burned alive inside his home. Officially, an accident. Unofficially, an assassination. Cal threw a rock at his television when the story broke. It didn't stop the static from roaring louder in his head. They met again. This time, in secret. The same room. Same chairs. No government shadowing them. Just 12 people. Trying to hold on to something that felt like truth. Mia was quieter now. Her hands shook when she poured coffee. No one commented. Everyone felt it too. The weight creeping up behind them like a wolf's breath on the back of the neck. "This is going to get worse," she said finally. The janitor, whose name turned out to be Thomas, nodded. "They're scared of us, not the aliens. Us." "They think we're carriers," the young teen, Nico, added. "Like we've been infected, altered." Cal leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Maybe we have been." Everyone looked at him. He didn't blink. "You all feel it, don't you?" he said. "Since they touched our heads, since we stood in that room that wasn't a room, something's been off, not wrong, just different." Mia whispered. "I don't sleep anymore." "I see things," Thomas added, "but not dreams. More like memories that aren't mine." Nico said nothing, just nodded. Cal stood. Whatever they did, whatever they're doing, it's not just observation anymore. It's seeped into us. They're studying us from the inside out. The room was quiet. No one denied it. That night, Cal drove back to Wyoming under skies full of stars that suddenly didn't feel like home. When he got to the trailer, the front door was wide open. He drew the pistol he hadn't used in years. Creaking floorboards. The smell of sweat. 3 men inside. They weren't thieves. Thieves don't wear black gloves and earpieces. They were government, or something worse. One turned, caught the sight of Cal in the doorway. "Easy now, Reynolds." Cal didn't lower the gun. "You break into my home, you better have a damn good reason." "We need a sample." He blinked. "What?" "Blood. DNA. You're going to give it to us." Cal didn't speak. He just fired. Not to kill, just to warn. The bullet sank into the wood frame above the man's head. All 3 dove down, weapons drawn, but none fired back, because they weren't there to fight. They were there to extract. Cal stepped forward, gun still raised. "You try that again, I'll give you more than blood." One of them, older, higher rank, held up his hand. "This isn't personal, Reynolds. It's protocol. You've been flagged as a Class 0 anomaly. The higher-ups want to know if you've been biologically compromised." Cal laughed. Once. Hard. "So now I'm the alien?" The agent didn't reply. Cal lowered the weapon but didn't holster it. "You got 10 seconds to leave, or I stop warning shots." They left. Quickly. But he knew they'd be back. And next time, it wouldn't be with words. The next gathering was different. Not in the room, in the ships. They were each taken separately. Cal found himself back in the cathedral-like space again. The quiet, the pulsing walls. But this time it was colder, darker. The entity returned, but it wasn't curious anymore. It was stern. "You are not prepared for what comes next." Cal stared back. "Then tell me." "You are being tested, not judged, not measured, just pressured." "For what?" "To see if you break, or if you bend." Cal clenched his fists. "You think we're weak?" "No, we think you are unpredictable, and that makes you dangerous." He took a step closer. "Then why choose us?" "Because if Earth survives its own worst nature, it will not be because of its kings. It will be because of its ghosts." The words slammed into him. The broken, the discarded, the ghosts. People like him, they weren't humanity's best. They were its last defense, because they were the only ones who had already lost everything and still got up. 3 days later, Thomas was found dead. Gunshot to the head. Officially, suicide. But Cal knew better. The message had changed. This was no longer a study. It was a countdown, not to war, but to collapse. A pressure test, to see if Earth would cannibalize itself out of fear, to see if the ones they chose, the survivors, could hold the line when everything else broke. Cal stood over Thomas's grave in the rain. No reporters, no flag, just a muddy hole and a wooden cross. Mia was there. Nico, too. They didn't cry. There was no room for that anymore. Cal lit a cigarette and whispered, "We're being pushed." Mia nodded. "And we're losing." "No," Cal said. "We're being watched lose. They're waiting to see what we do after." Hope wasn't supposed to come from men like him. It came from podiums and polished suits, from speeches about unity and better tomorrows. Not from someone who'd watched his own friends bleed out in the dirt, someone who couldn't sleep through the night without seeing faces he never got to bury. But the world was out of polished suits. The podiums were empty now. And Cal? Cal was still here. The day after Thomas was buried, something shifted. Mia called him. Not through a phone, not even through her voice. It was that pressure again, that familiar aching buzz behind his eardrums that he'd come to recognize as alien. "It's starting. Get to the others." No explanation. No time. Cal grabbed his coat, his rifle, and the keys to a truck that hadn't been reliable since 2009. He didn't bother locking the door behind him. What was the point? Nico was the first he reached. The kid was holed up in an abandoned elementary school outside Santa Fe. Walls covered in graffiti, desks flipped, the smell of smoke lingering in the air. Someone had tried to torch the place weeks ago. Nico had been living in one of the old classrooms. Sleeping bag on the floor, stacks of canned food, a solar-powered radio he'd rigged together with wires and foil. The kid looked thinner, sharper, like the last pieces of boyhood had burned off in the heat of fear. "You felt it too?" Nico asked, not bothering to say hello. "Yeah," Cal said. "It's getting louder. They're watching all of us. Not just the 12, the others too." Cal frowned. "Others?" "There's more now," Nico said. "Dozens, maybe more. People who've been contacted, changed. They're hiding. The governments are labeling them as anomalies. A few have vanished. 2 were killed in Russia." Cal closed his eyes. "They're trying to bury the cracks." "Can't bury what's already broken," Nico muttered. Cal stayed with him that night. They said little. Sleep was shallow and laced with tension. By morning, they were already moving again. Mia met them at an abandoned church in Kansas. There were 6 others already there. None of them looked like saviors. An ex-con who used to build bombs for a cartel. A woman who'd been homeless since she was 13. A blind poet who didn't speak unless he was quoting someone else. Every one of them had been called. Every one of them had felt something change. Mia stood at the altar when Cal entered. She didn't smile, just gave a nod. Her voice was lower now, more certain. "It's not a study anymore," she said. "It's a crucible." "They're trying to break us," Cal said, stepping forward. She shook her head. "No, they're trying to see if we break ourselves." The blind man spoke, quoting something old. "The fire tests the metal, but it also reveals what should not have been forged." Everyone went quiet. It was Nico who broke the silence. "So what are we supposed to do? Fight back? Preach peace?" Mia looked to Cal, and for the first time since this began, everyone else did too. Cal hated it. He hated the wait. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't anyone. But here they were, waiting for something. Anything. And so he spoke. "I've seen war," Cal said. "I've seen what men become when they think no one's watching, and this is worse." He looked at each of them. "They're not here to destroy us. They're here to see what we'll do with our own fear. They put pressure on the wound and waited to see if we'd bleed out or turn on each other." He stepped down from the platform. "And guess what? We're doing both." The ex-con scoffed. "So what? We just let the world eat itself?" "No," Cal said. "We show them we're still human." Mia raised an eyebrow. "And what does that mean now?" Cal looked towards the door, at the crumbling walls, the stained glass window shattered by time and fire. "It means we take the weight, the fear, the anger, and we keep standing anyway." Word spread fast. Not through media, not through screens, through whispers, a fire under the skin. The same way the first 12 had been called, more were feeling it. Residuals, everywhere, the world's rejected, the forgotten, the invisible. And as global governments cracked, rioted and clawed for control, a new movement began rising. Not from the rich or the holy, but from the dust, from the wreckage. People started meeting in abandoned churches, in bombed-out schools, in underground shelters. They didn't chant. They didn't sing. They listened to one another, because the only thing left that had meaning was shared pain. And for the first time, Earth wasn't united by hope or belief. It was united by trauma and survival. The alien ships began shifting again. 3 of them descended into the ocean. One hovered low above Tokyo for 12 hours, its lights pulsing to the rhythm of seismic activity. In the Sahara, a massive formation appeared in the sand. Geometric patterns scorched into the dunes without heat, without fire. Cal wasn't surprised. Every move they made now was intentional, calculated pressure. The world had already seen one survivor get burned alive. Now it was being offered a choice: tear itself apart out of fear, or evolve through pain. And Cal? He was becoming the face of that choice. He hated every second of it. The death threats came daily. Online forums painted him as a false prophet. World leaders called him dangerous. One country labeled him an unauthorized global influence actor. But others followed. Not as a leader, but as proof that something broken could still keep going. On the 21st day since the second gathering, the final signal came. Cal woke up in the middle of the night, gasping like someone had shoved water into his lungs. His ears rang, his skin burned, and in his mind, a single word pulsed like a drum: ascension. He stumbled outside into the cold. The sky was wrong. The stars, they were moving, not flickering, shifting, like a massive shape was sliding through them, blotting out constellations. Nico was already there, eyes wide, shaking. "You feel that?" Cal nodded. Then Mia called. "It's happening. The third phase. The real test." He didn't ask how she knew. They all knew. Because they weren't passengers anymore. They were pieces in something old, something slow and watching and deeply afraid, not of power, not of violence, but of resilience. The sky broke open for the last time, but it wasn't fire or light or death falling from above. It was quiet. A tear in the fabric of blackness, wide and slow, spreading across the stars like a pupil dilating. The alien ships stopped moving. The tremors in the Earth's crust stopped. Every broadcast, every satellite, every signal. Silence. Total, crushing, cosmic silence. And then they came. Not ships, not weapons, just presence. Over every continent, figures descended. Not physical. Projections. Images layered over the air, visible in every corner of the globe at once. Tall, shifting, faceless, impossible to focus on, like your brain rejected the shape of them. One appeared in front of Cal, standing in the empty field outside the church where he'd taken refuge with Mia, Nico, and the others. A whisper behind his thoughts confirmed it wasn't just for him. Everyone on Earth could see their own. Not an imagination. Not metaphor. Real. Personal. Tailored. It stood in the tall grass, unmoving, a ripple in reality that hummed with quiet pressure. And it spoke, not through sound, but through shared thought. The test is concluded. Cal didn't answer. The others stood around him, watching. Waiting. Maya whispered, "What does that mean?" And the entity heard her. "It means you have made your choice." Cal stepped forward. His voice came out dry. "What choice?" "Not to unite, not to surrender, not to obey, but to endure." The word rang deeper than it should have. He felt it in his teeth, his bones. You chose to continue as you are, without correction, without guidance. You chose defiance, even in the face of extinction. And so we choose our response. The figure raised one hand, and suddenly, across the planet, massive structures unfolded from the ships that had hung silent for weeks. Towers, thin, jagged, rising into the sky like the bones of sleeping titans. Alarms screamed, governments scrambled, missiles were readied, and all of it meant nothing, because the towers pulsed once, and everything stopped. Every weapon. Every camera, every machine, dead, no detonation, just off. The world froze. Cal raised his voice. "You said this wasn't judgment." "It isn't. It's warning. We feared what you are, and now we understand what you are not. You are not finished." The words hit like thunder. "You are still becoming, still transforming. That makes you unstable and dangerous, but also vital." Cal took a step closer. "So what now?" The entity pulsed, faintly, like a breath being held. "Now we leave." Mia blinked. "You're leaving?" "For now. Your defiance is not understood by many of our kind. Some wish to erase your kind as a precaution. Others wish to cage you. We chose to watch you instead. And now we know." Nico spoke up for the first time in hours. "Know what?" "That you are not a mistake." Cal clenched his fists. "Then what are we?" The figure looked at him directly, and for the first time, Cal saw something in it, not power. Fear. "You are an infection, one that survives everything, one that adapts. You are a virus that teaches even the void to feel pain." The word should have been an insult. But Cal felt nothing but understanding. They weren't chosen because they were strong. They were chosen because they were still standing, because humanity wasn't built on greatness. It was built on grit, on crawling forward when every bone in your body begged you to stop. The alien continued. "There is a term among our kind. It does not translate well. It means that which turns back the tide. It was once used to describe black holes, forces that even light cannot escape. Now it is used to describe you, your world, your people. You are gravity now. You pull even death toward you. And then the towers folded, the ships lifted, and like breath held too long, the sky exhaled. Every machine blinked back to life, every gun, every drone, every satellite, still there, unused, unneeded, because the message had been delivered, the test was complete, and Earth had passed, not because it had become better, but because it refused to give in. Because, in the face of the galaxy's gaze, it had chosen the one thing no civilization had dared before: to survive as it was, broken, bloody, but breathing. The projections vanished, the ships left, the sky returned, but nothing was the same. For days, no one spoke, not globally, not politically, because everyone was waiting for something worse. But nothing came, just the wind, just the dirt, just silence. And in that silence, meaning. Not joy, not peace, just understanding. The aliens hadn't come to destroy. They had come to look at the mirror we refused to face, and now that they had seen us, truly seen us, they had stepped back, because we terrified them, not with power, but with resistance. Months passed. Cal didn't give interviews. He didn't write a book. He didn't lead a revolution or accept medals or answer the thousands of emails begging for truth. He went back to the trailer, to the silence, to the smoke and the sky. Because in the end, that was who he was. Not a leader, not a prophet, just proof that something could be ruined and still remain. Mia called sometimes. Nico visited once. The others drifted back into their own corners of the world. But all of them knew. Something had changed, in the stars, in themselves. There were no powers given, no transformations, no final answers, just scars. And the memory of the day the galaxy realized what Earth was made of. Not light, not hope, but will. And Cal? He sat on the hood of his truck each night, cigarette in hand, eyes on the stars. Not waiting, just watching. Because he knew something now that most people didn't. The universe wasn't just vast. It was afraid. And for the first time in recorded history, it was afraid of us.